Thanks, Mark. I think this image is going to be quite familiar to several of you. We've used it in the past. I pay tribute to Bob Marshall, who did this fantastic illustration. And Bob walked over this site with Oliver O'Grady and myself. So we know that this is much more than a best guess. And I'm going to be talking today about our 6 excavations. And I'm going to try and lead up to the period when we signed a partnership agreement with Aberdeen University, and Gordon will take over from that point. So there is what we know of East Lomond. And I was really struck when David Strachan showed the illustrations from King's Seat this morning. I thought I was looking at East Lomond. It is stunningly similar. And whereas David's been working on the inside, we've been working on the outside in that enclosure before we even thought about going to the hill fort proper. Here is an image of the hill fort, and we're looking north beyond. And those who've been on the top of the East Lomond Hill will know that it's a fantastic strategic position. Out to the North Sea, over to the Lothians, up to the Southern Highlands, and very visible in the landscape. And in the main image there, you can see that dog leg shaped bank and ditch fortification. In the inset is the 3 hills that we think are comparable. One is Tapa North, up in the north in Aberdeenshire, 2 East Lomond, and 3 Traprain Law. But I think, given what I've seen this morning, I think there has to be a number 4 here, Gordon, and that has to be King's Seat. Because all the indications are that these are elite sites with lots of evidence that back that assertion up. And I'm going to talk about some of that in the presentation before I hand over to Gordon. So, is East Lomond a nuclear hill fort? Well, what defines a nuclear hill fort? You certainly have that upper citadel, that upper enclosure, and a circular structure right on top of the hill, never been excavated. And then you have these looping enclosures, these big banks, these walls around about that. It's certainly a well-fortified settlement. And then you have that W, that dogleg bank and ditch fortification. But actually, that's not where we have been excavating. I've not got a pointer. If you look at the photographic image, what you see to the left is the upper part of the hill, the top end of the hill. But where we've been excavating is that sloping shoulder out with the scheduled monument area that looks down over Glenrothes, Kirkcaldy, and across to Edinburgh and the Forth. And it is an extensive settlement. But that notion of what is a hill fort, is it simply determined by the bit that's enclosed on the top, or is it more? Would it include this area that we have called the Annex? Does this date to the 7th, 8th century? Well, from the Annex, the latest date we have is about 690 AD so far, but we have dates going back into that early Roman Iron Age period from the 1st century AD as well. So we haven't had an 8th century date yet, but that might prove to be something that we come across once we begin to look at excavations within the hill fort proper. And here is the Annex, outlined in blue in the image for you. And you can see why, David, I think it's very similar to King's Seat. And what you have on the other side is what is contained within that Annex. And basically, you have a small village associated with this hill fort, a density of occupation, some very clear and visible circular structures, a huge wall, and Gordon's going to say a bit more about the wall, because in the 2022 and 23 excavations, the Aberdeen University team focused on getting dates for the wall. And we have dates, and we have 2 dates. I think Gordon's maybe going to reinforce this, but certainly we look like we're having a 3rd century foundation date for the wall, and then refurbished in the 6th century. Features of this wall that are of interest is the fact that it's approximately, and I'm talking about the main wall that surrounds the enclosure, the wall's about 2.6 metres thick in parts. A lot of it is robbed, but there is still some substantial elements of the wall that remain. The 3 lines that you see up in the corner in the west, actually we wondered what those were, but our excavations over the past couple of years tells us that they are keying in buttresses into the wall. We thought when we came across some of the stone outside that it'd been tumble from the wall, but it's not. It's a very particular way of constructing because that edge slopes down the hill. So they are constructing buttresses to reinforce that wall. And I think, referencing Christina's talk today, if you look closely up there, there are at least four-poster structures at that far end of this village. But from within here, we have plenty of metalworking, in particular fine metalworking, blacksmithing, moulds, you name it, I think we've got it. And the assemblage is about to be looked at, our whole assemblage, by our colleagues at Aberdeen University. And we are taking some of this material up there next week. So there's a lot more to come that we haven't yet had a chance to investigate. I'm going to look at some of the finds, and we've tried to select a few images that give people a sense of the journey that we've been on. This was our first season, 2014. And from this season, we had early Roman Iron Age dates and late Roman Iron Age dates at East Lomond. The finds here that are illustrated, you would see on many Iron Age hill fort type sites. You'd see spindle whorls, quernstones, whetstones, some jewellery. But the two areas that were real pointers to us that this was something of significance is the horse's bridle bit, that metal feature that struck, that artefact that sits in the corner there, and the crucible fragment, which told us this was more than just kind of rough work. There's some fine work going on up on the hill. And in that early Roman Iron Age period, we find various artefacts, and I've brought out two here, which commonly date to the 1st and 2nd century AD. A lovely blue melon bead used as toggles for officers' cloaks or to dress horses' reins, to give them a bit of status, and a lovely fragment of a twisted glass bangle. And I know these from excavations down at Vindolanda, where they have whole bangles. It's a type 2 armlet. It's two types of glass that have been fused together. It's a status object, and clearly there's status objects coming in from Rome, which suggests some contact with Rome. And of course, from the Antonine Wall, you have the bridge nest stone just across the water. So the people here at East Lomond are the neighbours of those who are manning the Antonine Wall just to the south. So it's clear contact with Rome in that period. And we reckon that Agricola came through here in the Flavian period around about 80, 81 AD. And there is still, I think, a lot for us to really get our heads around in terms of what the contact is with Rome and the people who were living up on East Lomond. Excuse me. Late Roman Iron Age. And it's not just about Roman material, but here we have active local production. The top image is a rosette-headed pin. There are very few examples of these in the east of Scotland. There's a votive deposit at Cove C, and Professor Currell in the 1920s found the moulds for these particular pins on Traprainlaw, which we've always thought is a bit of a sister hill to East Lomond. So these are locally produced, and that pin, I can tell you, is copper alloy. There's a bit of silver in it, there's lead in it, but it was tinned. It was tinned to make it look like silver. I'm not saying the people up there were cheapskates, but hey, you know, but it's local production. It's local production, as we think is the bit of shale or possibly cannel coal, the jewellery there. And then we have the hearths. And this is the image that we've used time and again, because there are 5 stacked hearths in the one place, and you can see pad posts round about, posts that would suggest a structure, a building surrounding this area. So that's testament to a longevity of occupation on this bit of East Lomond. Indeed, I think Gordon's going to talk more about some of the hearths that we've uncovered this year. But there does seem to be an uninterrupted settlement for a long period of time on East Lomond. I looked back over the data structure reports from 14, 17 and 19, and in those 3 excavations under Oliver, I think we had probably about 22, 23 hearths that we uncovered, and that figure has been added to it. Gordon will say more about that from this year's excavation. Also, in that kind of late Roman period, Roman pottery, both Nene Valley coloured ware and red Oxfordshire ware, fragments identified by Fraser Hunt at the National Museum, and a metal detecting find from lower down in the hill, not within our area, by a local chap, Ian Ferguson, coins that date to the mid 4th century. So clear evidence of either gifting or contact with Rome when the Roman Empire was, by that time, down at Hadrian's Wall and beyond. But there still seems to be material that is appearing here much later than that period. Going into that post-Roman, early medieval period, 6th, 7th century, the bottom image is some people here have seen this before. It's a quenching tank. This is a ritually sealed clay-lined quenching tank, so it would have held water. None of these stones, these coloured stones, are local to the hill. I think they've probably been brought from the Tay or somewhere nearby and placed there before it was sealed over. A lovely ingot mould, making the silver bars that we know that the groups traded between each other. And then at the top, of course, crucible fragments. Again, more evidence that there is fine metalworking going on at East Lomond. And again, I think there were a couple of moulds this year that would suggest some lovely pins and ornamental material is being made here and being traded. So this is a place where there's a lot of contact with a wider world. More evidence of the elite status of East Lomond is E-ware, identified by Ewan Campbell. Now that we know that there's some at King's Seat as well, I think we've got to get another dot into this distribution map. But these are rarely found. E-ware is rarely found on the east coast of Scotland. It tends to be up, it comes in through Cornwall from France, and it's up the west coast and in Ireland and at royal sites. But we have E-ware at East Lomond, which again is another confirmation of its elite status. And I'm going to finish with this image because I think Gordon might want to say some bits and pieces later that support this image in a different kind of way. But this was found under a constructed pathway, pavement really, that we dated to 650 AD. So this is a late 6th, early 7th century item. Clearly we believe it's a Pictish spearhead. The end's been broken off, but you can see how it's been fused into the wood. I think there's more work we can do on this particular artefact. And it's been riveted into the wood, maybe not so obvious in the picture, but there's something this year that might help us to look at this afresh. So I'm going to leave you with that image, and I'm now going to hand over to Gordon, who's going to bring us up to date with the past few years' excavation. Thanks, Gordon.
All right, thanks, Joe. Yeah, so we got on board with the project in 2022, and we were delighted to do that, really, in terms of linking in with some of our work that we've been doing in northern Pickland in particular. This seemed like a golden opportunity to investigate a similar time period in Fife. So from 2022 and 2023, our investigations with the Trust focused on the Annex wall, which you can see down towards the bottom of that image, trenches 1 to 3, really trying to get a handle on the character of that Annex wall and some radiocarbon dates for the enclosure there. And our work in 2022 really began to hammer home just how complex the sequence was, how rich the settlement evidence was, and began to pin down the chronology. So the Annex wall that we see in the image there is most likely to date to the 5th to 6th century, but we may well have an earlier phase of enclosure underneath that. And inside that wall was a whole series of hearths, and these would have been at the centre of buildings where we're struggling in this time period to really identify the other elements of these structures, because they were using turf walls and cruck frames and the like. But again, it gives you an idea of just the number of buildings and structures inside the Annex wall there. And here's our calendar entries for Hearth of the Year from 2022, available in all good stores. And then 2023, we were back again investigating the Annex wall here, and began to find evidence for the form of some of these structures. So we have a sub-rectangular building, for example, from one of the earlier phases from the 2023 excavations. And some nice finds from those early years of our investigations, things like gaming counters, spindle whorls, and lots of metalworking residue, for example. So this year, 2024, we decided to go back into the Annex settlement itself. So this green area you'll see up in the kind of center of the image was meant to be one of our trenches, ended up being the only trench really that we focused on, just because of the complexity and richness of the deposits there. So this is a 10 by 10 meter area, and it gives you an idea of the size of this Annex enclosure, about 1.5 to 2 hectares in extent. And just despite relatively large trenches, we're still really scratching the surface within this Annex settlement. And on the right there, you can see our trench just below the hilltop there. This was almost a climate emergency for me. We were worried that the temperature was going to reach a good 21 degrees, which is outside my operating range of 12 to 16 degrees. But you'd be glad to know it was rainy and windy, and definitely not 21 degrees, despite what the Met Office was telling us. Despite that, we had lots of fun. So this is a combination of University of Aberdeen students and our fantastic local volunteers working together. It was a very busy trench, but it allowed us to really go down and get towards the base of the sequence and really characterize what's going on within the Annex settlement. And essentially, within this trench is just over 10 by 10 meters. We had 17 hearths within that single trench, and we didn't even bottom the trench in most locations. So again, just really suggesting this incredible density of settlement structures, cheek by jowl, different phases of buildings overlapping with one another, and midden deposits and metalwork evidence surrounding these structural phases. And we had some fantastic finds from this year, including a complete quernstone on the left here, and this is a couple of our University of Aberdeen students delighted with the finds that we are displaying very safely there on the kitchen floor. So we've done various kind of phase plans showing the development of the site. We identified at least 5 phases to the settlement remains within this 10 by 10 meter trench. This is one of the lower phases. You'll see on the left and the right here some very large hearths, outlines of, again, walls and buildings, very ephemeral walls. So it looks like they're just kind of revetment again for turf buildings within this trench here. So that was the early phase. A slightly later phase with at least 4 hearths. A third phase here with a number of hearths, including, again, what we think might be quenching troughs for metalworking, concentrated areas of slag from ironworking, and also fine metalworking as well, judging by some of the finds. So we've got a nice clay mold here for casting pins, and also pottery as well, including from the last phases, which based on previous years' dating would be 6th and 7th century. So again, might be suggesting that we've got Pictish traditions of handmade pottery in these later phases, as we've shown further north as well, in a time period that was largely thought to be a ceramic. But one of our star finds this year was this, which is a doorknob, but an ancient one, and not actually a doorknob. It's the base of a spear, which is fantastic to find. There's only a handful of these known from archaeological contexts across Britain and Ireland. Only 2 or 3, we think, actual objects of these from Scotland. There's a number of sites with molds. And these are depicted on a number of carved stone monuments, including from Colessie, which is just 7 kilometres from Falkland. So this is the Colessie warrior, and you'll maybe just see the base of the spear here. Oh, I've added on this to show you. It's hard to see you on this image, but you'll maybe just see on the right there, the base, they've got this circular object, the base of the spear, and this is thought to be one of these doorknob spear butts here. So very, very exciting to find that in an archaeological context. And indeed, that now pairs with the spearhead that was found in the earlier years of East Lomond. So hopefully by the end of the project, we'll be able to arm a small Pictish retinue, we think. Right, so let's add some context to these fantastic finds from East Lomond. Well, so far we've got a small number of radiocarbon dates, but this is beginning to paint quite an interesting picture. So these are the dates we have so far. So relatively few, but fairly consistent with the artifactual evidence we've got so far, suggesting a spread from the 3rd, 4th centuries AD, late Roman Iron Age, through to the 6th or 7th century AD. So just like some of the sites we've been finding further north, this real continuity between the Roman Iron Age and early medieval time periods that are usually studied separately and divided in terms of chronology. So if we are dealing with a major hilltop settlement of this time period, we can think of the kind of late Roman phenomena of hilltop settlement, which seems to re-emerge in places like France and Iberia in the 4th, 5th centuries. So this could be an example of this wider phenomena. More locally, our parallels include Traprain. So we have a settlement at Traprain throughout the Roman Iron Age into the 5th, maybe into the 6th century AD, and a similar kind of density of settlement at Traprain in terms of 182 hearths were found by Curl and Cree during their excavations in the earlier 20th century. So this could be a real parallel for Traprain. But if you think of the kind of geographical context of East Lomond, north of the Antonine Wall, then perhaps a more pertinent parallel might be our recent work at Tappenorth and Riney up in Aberdeenshire, where we've got this huge 17-hectare fort dating again from probably the 3rd century through to the, again, about 600 AD. So we've got this exciting new evidence of these large-scale settlements extending from the Roman Iron Age into the early medieval period. And East Lomond has given us this fantastic new case study of an example from slightly further south. And indeed, as I say, early days with the radiocarbon dates for East Lomond, but the start date, if we model this using Bayesian modelling, we can see the start dates of East Lomond and Tappenorth almost identical so far in that kind of 2nd and 3rd century AD context. So it'll be really exciting to see how that develops. And then if we think about, what is the significance of Tappenorth? Well, Tappenorth overlooks this amazing late Roman to post-Roman power centre at Riney, this royal centre, as far as we can tell from the artifactual signature and from the place name there. So do we have something similar at East Lomond in terms of, I think we need to begin to think about what might have been down in the lowlands below East Lomond. And that's slightly complicated by the more built landscape around about East Lomond. But we've got Pictish stones from Westfield, just the west of the village of Falkland, and down to the east we've got these really intriguing buildings at Lathrisk, which could be a series of Pitcairn style buildings, but they could also be something slightly fancier in terms of they seem to have more complicated architecture than some of the Pitcairn buildings. So we'd really like in the next few years to begin to not only investigate the hill more, but investigate the environs of the site. And as I say, we've really only scratched the surface of the Annex, let alone gotten into the hill fort itself. So it's exciting times, and we hope to be at East Lomond for many years to come. So undoubtedly, I think we've got a major case study, I think, here in terms of a Roman Iron Age to early medieval power centre. And hopefully we'll be able to come back in future years and tell you much more about it. So thank you very much for listening. One thing to say is we couldn't do this without our fantastic volunteers who help us out, and through the trust and the university support. Also, a lot of our work in recent years has been funded through donations to the departments. So if anyone would like to give some money, you can also support us in other ways with a great merch line here. Modelling. Kathy McKeever from AOC is also modelling one of our jumpers, and I'm not even paying her to do that as well. And we also, if you want to read more about the wider context of East Lomond, we've got this book out as well. So please check it out. But thank you very much for listening.